Hi, we're EC1, and this is the Life in FinTech podcast, a podcast about living and working in the world of FinTech, brought to you by EC1 Partners.
Hi, my name's Sam, and I'm Chief People Officer at EC1 Partners, and I'm talking to Mackenzie today, and the subject we're talking about is life in FinTech. And I'm going to kind of be questioning Mackenzie on how she found herself doing FinTech recruitment. So I'll pass over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Mackenzie. I'm a researcher here in the New York office at EC1. I started in July and I graduated from college in May of 2022.
Excellent. And what did you do at college?
Sure, yeah. So I studied American Studies, which is a relative.
What does that mean?
Sure, yeah. So it's a relatively new field of study. I want to say it started in the 90s, but it's a combination of history, politics, culture, really just a hodgepodge of different things, all things America, what it means to be American. And I chose the major mainly because I just really liked the coursework, really loved my professors. I wanted to study American Studies, like I said, really enjoyed the classes, enjoyed the content. And I knew from the jump that there wouldn't be necessarily a concrete job path. But for me, college was more of like a period of maturing and growing up and learning how to communicate with adults, and kind of improve my work ethic. So, right from the jump, I knew that there wouldn't be necessarily a set path. But for me, it was more about, becoming close to my closest friends, and really just learning how to, do presentations and manage my time. So I know for college, it's not for everyone. That's the case, but
I love that. And I think, I've spoken to quite a few people now, and the majority of people I've spoken to, not just EC1, but I guess in general, you have this huge amount of pressure when you're leaving school to kind of decide what your next step is. And I think so many people just think so much about their degrees or other education that they end up then leaving the education or the degree, and they're so desperate to link their role to their degree that it becomes quite stressful with a job hunt, because you're thinking, I studied for 3 years, how can I just go into a role now that doesn't relate to that studying? So I absolutely love it. And I think it's so refreshing to hear that, you use that time to kind of grow as a person and not necessarily grow for your next step. And did you move away, or was you kind of still living at home?
Yeah, so I went to school in Maine, Bates College, a small liberal arts school. I grew up on Long Island, New York, so just a few hours east of the city. Yeah. So went away to school in Maine, wanted to end up back in New York City, or in New York City. I've spent a lot of time in the city growing up, coming in for field trips and weekends and things like that. So I'm, used to being away from home, but now it's actually nice because I'm closer. It's easy for me to get home on the weekends.
Yeah, you're now living the dream of what you kind of thought about when you were younger.
Right, exactly.
And did COVID affect obviously you graduated last year, so still really fresh out of school. Did COVID affect you in any shape or form? Because obviously you went for the social side primarily. Did COVID affect that in any way? And how did you overcome that?
Absolutely. So COVID erupted sophomore year, almost 3 years ago, which is wild to say. Yeah. And so sophomore year was cut short. I actually decided to take the fall.
Sorry, I'm very British. What does that mean? What does that year mean?
Sophomore year. So, right. Yeah. So it was my second year. So I was in school for 4 years. So sophomore year, second year of school in March, we were sent home. I decided that for my third year, I actually took the fall semester off. I was ahead on credits. I could have graduated a semester early, but I didn't necessarily want to do that. So I took a semester off, and I actually worked at a marina close to my hometown where I had worked for a few years,
Yeah.
and saved some money, and didn't really want to go back to the COVID bubble at school. Everything was still really fresh. But I think as far as my job search, with COVID, obviously we saw a lot of jobs go fully remote. I knew that I didn't want that. So when I, senior year was getting around to the job search, I was really looking for hybrid and in-person opportunities, just because I think it's really easy, especially for your first job out of college, to, it sounds nice doing something fully remote, but I really wanted to be surrounded by people. I think that's the best way to learn. So definitely impacted my search in that way.
So how did you go about your search? Because, it's all kind of happened pretty quickly for you. So did you face any struggles? How did you go about finding yourself in recruitment?
Yeah, so senior year, I wasn't necessarily in a hurry in the fall to land my role after school, but I went to the career center at my college, a great resource. Sort of explained to them, my situation and what I was looking for, and how I was kind of unclear on what I wanted to do. I know that I knew that I wanted to work, of course, and so they, I spoke with one of the counselors. They had mentioned recruiting as a potential option. If you like speaking to people, so many different opportunities, especially out of school. But what I liked about recruiting, or at least how it was explained to me, and I see that now, is that you kind of reap what you sow, if that makes sense. Like what you put in is what you get out. And I think I was kind of told, if you're not afraid of working hard and putting the time and effort in, it's a field where you can see a lot of success early on, which is something that I didn't really see with a lot of other opportunities. And I saw, just a lot of potential for personal growth within the field. So that's why I kind of shifted my search in that direction. So February of senior year, just about a year ago now, actually, which is wild again, but I interviewed with a tech recruiting firm based here in New York City, not EC1. And I went through their interview process remotely, signed an offer letter, and was set to start in July. And then I moved to the city for this job. In June, they reached out to me and said, hey, the market's been really tough. We're going to have to push your start date back until September. And I kind of just went back and said, that's not going to work for me. I moved here. I'm ready to go. So that's when, of course, I panicked. I'm living in a New York City apartment with, at this point, no job on the horizon. So I went straight to LinkedIn, went straight to my laptop, had some late nights, just kind of mass applying to jobs. Came across EC1, applied on LinkedIn. Max got in touch with me, I think the next day. We hopped on a call, explained the situation, and, they were willing to move quickly with me. I was eager to get in the door. So, I think the way that everything worked out, I started at EC1 a week after I was supposed to start with this other company. So it was just kind of a blessing in disguise. I think I was, meant to end up here. And I'm really happy with how it all worked out, but definitely was a moment of panic having an apartment in New York City and then being out of a job for, I would say, maybe a week, but luckily EC1 was.
That turnaround time, though, is pretty impressive. And, you obviously used your initiative and thought, okay, I'm going to jump straight onto LinkedIn, had quite a few late nights applying. Had you applied for roles, the original role, I guess, how did you get that via LinkedIn before? Or was that through your careers advisor? Did you, was your profile on LinkedIn quite big at this stage? Was it quite something that you had already kind of put the time and effort in, or was it a bit like, let me just make a LinkedIn profile and get my CV out there?
When I started at EC1, it's funny. I think I had like 19 connections. Like it was bare, it was really just had my college on it. And then I was using it to apply to things and would send my resume from there. So when I started at EC1, I think Natan asked me on my first day, like, how many connections do you have? and I was like 19, and he's like, that's not going to work. So now I'm, I think I have like over 900, obviously still growing.
Look, I think it's something, and again, I've been talking to quite a lot of people, and especially people at the start of their careers. And I guess recruiters use LinkedIn day in, day out. And it's like using a mobile phone. It's like second to none. And we're so used to it. But actually, I'm always intrigued to know how people actually feel about it at first. Like, it's kind of like when Facebook first came out, like, were people a bit nervous to post? So, it always intrigues me how people kind of got on to the LinkedIn platform and whether they feel confident in it. Because, I think a lot of people to this day don't really use it to its full potential. But also, I think it's just one of those things about putting yourself out there, which you're not taught that in school. And then suddenly you're putting yourself out there with all kind of like your personal information, branding yourself, and obviously pretty much selling yourself to these companies. So, it's amazing that you kind of thought, okay, I haven't got this job. I'm going to jump on LinkedIn and just mass apply.
Now that I'm in the LinkedIn world, I don't see myself ever leaving, and, definitely hope to continue growing my network for sure.
And kind of just going back again, when you were offered the technology recruitment role, had you purely looked at technology recruitment, or were you quite open to different sectors? How did you find yourself, finding the role within technology?
Yeah, so I thought that there was the most potential and opportunity within tech. Obviously, it's one of the most like booming sectors of business. And I had interviewed with a few other companies that were more like HR recruitment, things like that. But with tech, I think it's something that I enjoy learning about. And I think, as we advance as a society in general, it's going to be the most relevant. And I just think down the line, it's the most lucrative and just the most, there's just so much opportunity. Look at like ChatGPT, for example. It's just, I think the most relevant. So that's why I kind of steered my direction in that way. And I think also I really enjoy learning about, new kinds of technology and just new innovation. It's a great space to be in for that.
So you weren't daunted by the thought of going into like a FinTech recruitment company. You were pretty much the opposite of like, that's where you knew you wanted to be.
But I knew that it's a booming industry and just is a highly invested in field. So, just being a sponge in the office those first few days, just, listening to people on calls, doing our morning meetings, and also just speaking to candidates. I feel like I learned a lot in my first few weeks, and just hearing the lingo, hearing the vocabulary, it becomes easy to pick up. And of course, on LinkedIn, there are just so many articles, so many really like educational posts and everything. So definitely something that I enjoyed getting the hang of, and I'm still learning every day. So.
And just, I've heard it a few times, actually from a few people in the US office, the term sponge. Explain that to everyone, because I love it. It makes complete sense.
Yeah. So really just exactly how it sounds, just absorbing everything, whether it's a meeting that you're sitting in on, or, someone's taking a call at their desk, and just you've seen my notebook. I think I take so many notes. And
I think you have the neatest notebook I have ever seen in my career history.
Yeah, no, exactly. So
I feel like we need to like put in the notes of this podcast your absolutely epic notepad. It's great.
Yeah, it's my Bible for sure. And it's a great way to retain information too. So yeah, I think just and not being afraid to ask questions. I think that's something, coming right out of school into a job. I was a little, I would say, pensive at first to be asking questions, and especially having such an open line of communication with my bosses was not something I was necessarily expecting, but it's so great. And I think I've gotten a lot better at not being afraid to ask questions, and just really being curious, because that's encouraged here, which has made the transition like so much easier.
That's so good to hear. And with the transition, had you ever worked in an office before? Had you ever been in an office environment?
Yeah, so I worked in a marina, as I mentioned, throughout high school and college. So there was a little bit of an office aspect to that job, but obviously much different from here, not corporate in any way, a family business. But I did, I would answer the phones there. I did some paperwork, classic family business, just kind of being a generalist and wearing many hats, doing whatever they needed. So definitely not the same, but also valuable experience, I would say.
And so how did you find, like, just going back to last summer, how did you find, like, your first day coming into the office? Was it daunting? Were you excited? Did you feel a bit like, wow, what am I doing? Or was you quite confident with that? Because I think especially since COVID, like you said, a lot of the interviews are done remotely. Whereas I think prior to COVID, you potentially would have a 3 or 4 stage interview, going into the office, meeting quite a few people face to face, kind of gauging the environment before you've, stepped foot into the workspace. Whereas now I think people are doing everything remotely, which don't get me wrong, I'm a huge advocate for. But at the same time, I do think it's quite scary going to a new job on your first day without stepping foot into that office before. So yeah, was it quite daunting, or was you quite confident?
Yeah, so I think definitely daunting, coming right out of college, but everyone was just so friendly and welcoming, and genuinely everyone here is someone that I could have a drink with and get along with really well. Of course I come in first day in my suit, pantsuit situation. Everyone's dressed much more casually, which was a relief. And but yeah, no, of course it's daunting. I'm in New York City too, in the financial district. It's intimidating getting off the train at Wall Street.
It is, and I think hearing your story is so inspiring. And I think, I said how much I loved it before, but I really, really, really loved that your degree was kind of more for a social aspect, as opposed to like trying to get your foot forward in your career. I think recruitment uses a lot of soft skills and huge amounts of skills that we use in our day-to-day lives. Do you think doing that degree and kind of using it as a social side, do you think that really helped you today to kind of like where you are in your career at EC1?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, throughout college was giving a lot of presentations, meetings with professors, working with peers to, whether it was to do a paper or, some sort of project. I think all of those skills translate, especially being able to communicate, as silly as it sounds, going from high school to college, that's a big transition. And I'm so grateful to my professors and also my peers, because I really learned, how to converse in an adult and, effective way. I had a radio show throughout college, so I think that also helps.
I was just about to say, I mean, a lot of, I've spoken to quite a lot of people at EC1, and, I've approached quite a few people saying, hey, do you want to record a podcast with me? And people are like, no. Even people who have had like years and years of experience, they're nervous and put off by the thought of recording a podcast. Whereas yourself, you're like, yeah, absolutely, sure. What time? So yeah, it completely figures that you had a radio show.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and did a few interviews on there. Did it every week. It was really just a nice escape from my work and everything else that was going around for a few hours every week. But I think that on its own, I was very heavily involved. We booked some concerts, working with artists and things like that. I think is all very relevant for the seat I'm in now.
Absolutely. And I think quite a lot of the time we sometimes lose sight of, especially when we're looking at CVs, we're looking at sometimes education or what people studied or how long they studied for. And some of the skill sets that we use in everyday life, or, throughout college, running a radio show, that's incredible, genuinely. And I think, that, in my opinion, can sometimes get you further than having a degree in law.
Right.
So, honestly, hats off to you. And I think you've done such an incredible job so far. What would you say is your favorite part of the role?
Yeah, so this is something that actually I have to give credit to Natan. He brought this up a few weeks ago, and he was just talking about recruitment and how it's really a meritocracy, which is kind of what I said earlier. You reap what you sow. So recruitment is a field where if you're willing to be consistent, persistent, put the time and work in, it's a field where you could really see those results. And what, I particularly like about EC1 is there's a really clear track for growth, for personal growth. And that is something when I was on my job search that I was really looking for. I was looking for a true entry level opportunity. There are so many jobs that are entry level, but you need 4 years of experience or something. So EC1, they're willing to, work with you and be a part of your development and your growth, which is something that, seeing Brendan and Sadie, be where they are now was just super inspiring and exciting. So I really love that. And of course, I think we're given a lot of autonomy too over our own schedules and how we, divide our time. So those are just a few things, but also another one, I think being able to make a really tangible impact on people's lives. I had a call last week with the wife of someone I placed a few months ago, because she's actually on the job market. So we just had a chat about, what she's looking for in her next role. And before we even got into that, she was just like, I wanted to thank you so much. She's so happy there. The timing was so great because she actually was able to leave her job that she wasn't very happy at because he got this new opportunity. So it was just, it was really nice to just hear wow, I truly made a difference in someone's life. So that was great.
That's amazing. And I think that's such a great story, I guess, to always have in the back of your mind. Even when you're having a bad day, in the back of your mind, you can think you're not just necessarily changing one person's life, you're changing a whole family, which is really, really incredible. That's such a great point to wrap up on. What would you, I'll sort of finish off with my one last question. What bit of advice would you have given your younger self, if anything, or what would you potentially have done a bit differently?
Yeah, I think I would tell myself to really just take things one day at a time. Don't be in such a hurry. Time is such a luxury, especially when you're in college, and to just really soak it all in, which I think I did a decent job at. But, I think also having friends that had that more concrete career path, people who were engineering or pre-med, I think I would look around and get a little concerned about myself. But I think really to just take a step back and just, don't be too hard on yourself. Everything has a funny way of working out, and to just kind of trust that.
It was so great talking to you, and I will hopefully see you in New York City soon.
You've been listening to Life in FinTech by EC1 Partners. Find us at ec1partners.com or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.